November 23rd, 1991, Garden Lodge, London. John Deacon stood outside Freddie Mercury's bedroom door, hand hovering over the wood, unable to knock. Inside that room, his best friend was dying, and John, the quietest member of Queen, the invisible bassist who'd spent 20 years hiding behind Freddie's spotlight, was about to receive a gift that would change the rest of his life: permission to disappear. What Freddie told him in the next 30 minutes would explain one of rock music's greatest mysteries: why John Deacon, at the height of Queen's success, would walk away from everything and never look back. This is the story of the last promise, the promise that made silence louder than any song. Of all four members of Queen, John Deacon was the enigma. While Freddie commanded stages, Brian gave intellectual interviews, and Roger charmed journalists, John stood in the shadows and played his bass. Quietly, perfectly, invisibly. He joined Queen in 1971, the fourth and final piece of a puzzle that would conquer the world. He was 20 years old, an electronics engineering student who barely spoke during his audition. But his bass lines were so solid, so instinctively perfect, that Brian and Roger knew immediately. This was their foundation. For 20 years, John provided the heartbeat, the rhythm that allowed Freddie to soar, Brian to experiment, Roger to explode. He wrote some of Queen's biggest hits: You're My Best Friend, Another One Bites the Dust, I Want to Break Free, songs that generated millions in royalties, that filled stadiums, that became part of cultural DNA. But John never wanted the spotlight. He wanted to play, to serve the music, to be the invisible force that made everything else possible. And now, standing outside Freddie's bedroom in November 1991, John understood that the music was ending. The autumn air in London was thin and cold, but inside Garden Lodge, the world felt even smaller. The grand house, once famous for its lavish parties, its exotic decor, its constant stream of creative chaos, had become a sanctuary of whispers. Medical equipment lined the hallways. Nurses moved quietly between rooms. Jim Hutton, Freddie's partner, managed the impossible task of keeping their friend comfortable as his body betrayed him day by day. John had been visiting regularly, but each visit was harder than the last. Watching Freddie disappear, this force of nature reduced to a fragile figure in silk pajamas, was breaking something fundamental in John's carefully protected soul. He took a breath, smoothed his sweater, the same nervous gesture he'd had since childhood, and finally pushed the door open. The room was dim, heavy curtains blocking the afternoon light. The space was scented with expensive cologne and the medicinal tang that Freddie couldn't quite hide anymore, despite his best efforts. Freddie Mercury, Farouk Bulsara, his friend of 2 decades, was propped up against a mountain of silk pillows, looking fragile, like a piece of glass that had been polished too thin. He'd lost at least 50 pounds. His cheekbones jutted sharply beneath the skin that had taken on a grayish pallor. The thick mustache that had defined his 1980s look was still there, but it seemed too large for his face now, emphasizing the weight loss rather than complementing his features. But when Freddie saw John, his eyes, those dark, perceptive eyes that had commanded millions, flickered with a trace of the old mischief. "Oh, look who it is," Freddie whispered, his voice a raspy shadow of the 4-octave instrument that had once filled Wembley Stadium. "The invisible man decides to show his face." John managed a small, painful smile. The joke was familiar. Freddie had been calling him the Invisible Man for years, teasing him about his reluctance to give interviews, his preference for shadows over spotlights. But today, the nickname felt heavier somehow, more prophetic. He pulled a chair close to the bed, sat down, and took Freddie's hand. It felt weightless, almost hollow. The rings that had once adorned every finger were gone, too loose now, too heavy for weakened hands to support. "I didn't want to wake you, Fred," John said quietly. "I wasn't sleeping, darling." "I was thinking," Freddie said, his gaze drifting to the window where thin November light tried to penetrate the curtains. "I was thinking about the rhythms, about how you always knew exactly where I was going to go before I even sang the note. How did you do that?" John looked down at their joined hands. "It was easy to follow you. You were the only map I ever needed." It was true. From their first rehearsal together in 1971, John had understood Freddie's musical instincts with an almost supernatural clarity. While Brian constructed elaborate guitar harmonies and Roger provided explosive percussion, John created the foundation, the bass lines that anticipated Freddie's vocal choices, that supported without overwhelming, that made space for genius while providing the structure genius needed to soar. They'd never discussed this connection explicitly. John wasn't the type to articulate feelings, but Freddie understood. Freddie had always understood John better than anyone, seeing past the silence to the deeply feeling person underneath. A heavy silence settled between them. John wasn't like Brian with his eloquent explanations, or Roger with his quick wit and faster tongue. He was a man of frequencies and vibrations, not speeches. His language was bass lines and chord progressions, not words. But Freddie knew John's silence better than anyone. He knew that under that quiet exterior, under the carefully maintained invisibility, John was breaking. "John, listen to me," Freddie said, his grip tightening with surprising strength for someone so diminished. "When the music stops, and it will stop soon, we both know that the world is going to get very, very loud." John started to protest, to say something reassuring, but Freddie shook his head gently. "Don't. We don't have time for pretending anymore." Freddie's voice was firm despite its fragility. "The world is going to get loud, John. They're going to want pieces of us. They're going to want to turn our lives into a museum. They'll want to preserve Queen like something in amber, perfect and dead and available for examination." John felt his throat tighten. "I don't care about the world, Freddie. I just want to play." "But that's the thing, Deaky," Freddie said, using the nickname only the band used, bringing back memories of rehearsal rooms and recording studios and 20 years of brotherhood. "You've always been the most honest one of us. You don't have the armor Brian has, that intellectual distance he can create between himself and everything else. You don't have Roger's fire, that anger that protects him. You play with your soul completely exposed, and that's a dangerous way to live when the spotlight is too bright." Freddie shifted slightly against his pillows, wincing with pain he tried to hide. John started to help, but Freddie waved him off. "I need to tell you something," Freddie continued, "and I need you to really hear me, not just listen with that polite silence you do so well." John nodded, squeezing Freddie's hand gently. "The industry, this whole circus we've been part of for 20 years, it only works because there's a ringmaster. Someone who can handle the pressure, who thrives on the madness, who knows how to turn chaos into performance." Freddie's eyes were intense now, holding John's gaze with something approaching desperation. "I was that ringmaster. I loved it. The spectacle, the performance, the constant negotiation between art and commerce. It energized me." He paused, catching his breath. "But you, John, you've never loved that part. You've tolerated it because it came with the music, because playing bass in Queen meant dealing with all the other noise. But without me to run interference, without me to be the lightning rod for all the insanity." He trailed off meaningfully. "What are you saying, Fred?" John asked, though part of him already knew. "I'm saying that after I'm gone, the lions will bite." Freddie's voice was gentle, but absolutely certain. "Brian and Roger, they'll want to continue. They'll want to tour, to record, to keep Queen alive. And they should. That's who they are. Brian needs the intellectual challenge. Roger needs the adrenaline." He squeezed John's hand again. "But you don't need any of that. And more importantly, it will destroy you if you try to force it. I've watched you, John. I've seen how much effort it takes for you to be visible when every instinct tells you to hide. I've seen how exhausted you are after every tour, every interview, every moment in the spotlight." John felt tears beginning to form. "But I love playing with you, with all of you." "I know," Freddie said softly, "but you love playing with me, with the four of us together, the way we've been for 20 years. That configuration, that specific chemical reaction, it only works with all four elements present." He pulled John closer, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "Promise me something. When I'm gone, don't let them force you to be a caricature. Don't let them turn you into John Deacon of Queen, when what you really are is just John Deacon, a man who loved playing bass with his friends." "How am I supposed to do that?" John's voice cracked. "How am I supposed to just stop? If the joy goes out of it, walk away," Freddie said firmly. You don't owe them your peace. You don't owe the world your continued visibility just because they want it. Queen was our gift to the world, but your life, your actual life after Queen, that belongs to you. John shook his head, tears flowing freely now. How am I supposed to play the bass line when I can't hear the melody anymore? Freddie smiled, a soft, tired expression of pure love. It was the smile he saved for the people who truly mattered, stripped of all performance and pretense. Then don't, he said simply. If the melody is gone, keep the silence. It's just as beautiful if you know how to listen to it. The words hung in the air between them, profound and permission-giving in equal measure. You're giving me permission to quit? John asked, needing to understand clearly, needing to know that what he was hearing was really what Freddie meant. I'm giving you permission to choose yourself, Freddie corrected, to protect the part of you that made the music possible in the first place. The world will call you a recluse. They'll write think pieces about why you disappeared. They'll speculate endlessly about what happened to the invisible bassist. He paused, gathering strength. Let them. Their opinions don't matter. What matters is that you know the truth. Walking away from something that's destroying you isn't weakness. It's the bravest thing you can do. But Brian and Roger, they'll need me. They'll want to continue. Brian and Roger will do what they need to do, and you'll do what you need to do, Freddie said. They'll understand, even if it takes them time. They love you, John. They'll want you to be okay more than they'll want you to be present. They sat together for a long time after that, not saying a word. It was their final session, a duet of silence. Two men who'd created music together for 20 years, now communicating in the spaces between words, in the language they both understood better than any other, the language of rhythm and rest, of sound and the absence of sound. John realized then that Freddie wasn't just giving him permission to quit. He was giving him a final gift, the freedom to disappear, the freedom to be invisible by choice rather than by habit, the freedom to step out of a spotlight he'd never wanted in the first place. Will you be okay? Freddie asked after a while. Really okay? John thought about it carefully. I have Veronica, the kids, a life that exists outside all of this. I think I'll be okay. Good, Freddie said. That's what I needed to hear. Will you, John asked, be okay? Freddie's smile was complicated, sad, and peaceful, and resigned all at once. I've had the most extraordinary life, John. I got to be exactly who I wanted to be. I got to make music with three of the most talented people I've ever known. I got to perform for millions. I got to love and be loved. How many people can say all of that? He squeezed John's hand one more time. I'm not okay with dying, but I'm okay with having lived. And I'm especially okay knowing that you're going to choose life, your actual life, over this beautiful ghost we're about to become. On November 24th, 1991, at 7 p.m., the melody officially ended. The world saw John Deacon perform a few more times after Freddie's death. They saw him at the tribute concert for AIDS awareness at Wembley Stadium in April 1992, his face a mask of grief barely holding together. They saw him play The Show Must Go On with Elton John standing in for Freddie in 1997 at a benefit concert in Paris. But those who watched closely noticed something. John wasn't really there. His fingers moved correctly, producing the right notes at the right times. But his eyes were somewhere else. He was looking for a ghost. He was listening for a voice that wasn't coming through the monitors. After that night in Paris in 1997, the last time John Deacon would ever perform with Queen, he laid down his bass guitar and walked away. Not dramatically, not with press releases or farewell tours or explanations. He simply stopped performing, stopped giving interviews, stopped attending award ceremonies and Hall of Fame inductions, stopped participating in the endless machinery of Queen's posthumous success. When Brian and Roger wanted to tour with Paul Rodgers in 2005, John declined. When they found Adam Lambert and began the wildly successful Queen plus Adam Lambert tours, John declined. When they were inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, John sent his regrets. People called him a recluse. The press dubbed him the Hermit of Rock. Journalists wrote speculative pieces about his mental health. his relationship with the other band members, his feelings about Queen's continued success without him. The world wondered, why would someone walk away from millions of dollars in the adulation of millions of fans? Why would the bassist of one of the greatest rock bands in history choose obscurity over legacy? What happened to John Deacon? But John knew exactly why. He was keeping a promise made in a dim bedroom in Garden Lodge on a cold November afternoon in 1991. He understood what the world didn't, what the world perhaps couldn't understand. Some friendships are so profound, and some musical bonds so sacred, that when one half of the heartbeat stops, the other must fall silent out of respect. It wasn't about anger or grief or inability to continue. It was about recognizing that the specific magic Queen created required all four elements to be present. Without Freddie, there was no Queen, not the Queen that mattered, not the Queen that had transformed four struggling musicians into legends. Brian and Roger needed to continue. They needed to keep performing, to honor Freddie's legacy by keeping the music alive. That was their path, their way of processing loss and celebrating what they'd built together. But John needed something different. He needed to honor Freddie by doing exactly what Freddie had told him to do. Choose himself. Protect the part of himself that had made the music possible in the first place. In the years since his retirement, John Deacon has lived quietly in London with his wife Veronica and their 6 children. He doesn't give interviews. He doesn't attend Queen events. He doesn't participate in documentaries or retrospectives or anniversary celebrations. To the public, he's disappeared. But to those who knew him best, he hasn't disappeared at all. He's simply chosen the silent note, the rest between measures that's just as important as the sound itself. Brian May has defended John's decision repeatedly over the years. He's entitled to his life, Brian said in a 2014 interview. He wants to be private. He doesn't want his life dissected. I completely understand and respect that. Roger Taylor echoed the sentiment. John is doing what's right for John. We all handle loss differently. Brian and I need to keep playing. John needed to stop. There's no right or wrong in that. What neither of them said publicly, what perhaps they couldn't articulate, was that John wasn't running away from Queen. He was staying faithful to Queen. To the real Queen, the configuration that had existed for 20 years. The specific alchemy that could never be replicated or replaced. Freddie had told him, when the music stops, the world is going to get very loud. And John, in his quiet, dignified way, had simply decided to stop listening. The silent note isn't an absence. It's a choice. It's the most honest thing John Deacon has ever done, more honest even than the bass lines that helped define an era. By refusing to participate in Queen's afterlife, John preserved something precious. The memory of what Queen actually was when Freddie was alive. He became the keeper of the authentic experience, the guardian of the real thing. When people listen to Queen albums now, when they hear Another One Bites the Dust, or You're My Best Friend, they're hearing John Deacon playing with Freddie Mercury, not with a replacement, not with a tribute, with Freddie. That's the gift John gave back to his friend. By walking away, by choosing silence, he ensured that every note he ever recorded with Queen remains exactly what it was. A moment in time when 4 specific people created something that can never be recreated. In 2023, John Deacon is in his early 70s. He still lives in London. He still refuses interviews. He still declines to participate in anything Queen related.